Sean from Blue Hub, and today I wanted to walk through the use of the QuickBooks integration, so how to configure it and how to then use it, and roughly what it will look like when you are using it with Cin7. So firstly, once you have your QuickBooks account connected, in the top left you will have a QuickBooks icon here showing you everything that needs to be synced, and the sync history if you want to see that as well. The value of having this is you can always either manually choose to sync, or you can view the sync history, which will show you everything that is pending to sync and everything that has successfully synced previously, as you can see here. If you ever want to skip anything, so you don't want things syncing, so let's say we don't want this info or this sales order we have here to sync, we can click the pending button and we can choose to skip this manually if we want to. But this is on a one-to-one basis, so you will need to do this for every transaction you do not want to go to QuickBooks. So getting into the actual settings of the integration itself, if we go into our integrations tab and we then go into QuickBooks, we will get a few different configuration pages we can go through. And that's loaded. So firstly, you get this page on how the integration actually worked, and I do recommend reading this. It is going to be basically what I'm going to explain today, but it will cover more areas in less depth, so it's probably worth you reading this. We then have the general settings here, where you can go through and make some changes to QBO, which I'll be talking through now just to tell you some things that we often see or don't see. So for example, export purchase orders to QBO is typically something we don't need. We don't necessarily need the purchase orders in QBO, especially if they don't link to invoices, which I don't believe to be the case. So usually we do recommend that's turned off. Same with sales quotes. You don't typically need quotes in QBO, so we recommend that be turned off as well. Now, there are unique circumstances for both of these if you do want to report on either or, but we typically just recommend they're turned off. You then have the option to import purchase order invoices, which is turned off by default here, and we would usually say that stays off because there's no need for invoices from QBO to come into that Cin7, since QBO is going to be your main accounting platform. It's better that that's financially accurate than Cin7, so you don't necessarily need those in Cin7. There's no harm in doing so, though. It would make your Cin7's profit and loss maybe look a little bit more accurate, but it would also add a lot more transactions to the system, which probably aren't necessary. Auto-receive stock when loading purchase orders invoices from QuickBooks. I think that is tied to the above, or yeah. But you definitely want that turned off because you don't ever want to be auto-receiving stock into Cin7. We then have the option here for importing sales invoices. So that's importing sales invoices from QBO to Cin7. Now, typically you aren't going to want this once again because you're going to be adding your invoices and your orders into Cin7 directly and allowing that to go to QBO. However, there are once again some unique circumstances where that may differ. Here there are 3 different payment options that QBO allows for, and turning these on just allows those payment types to work with the QBO. Here we have export reference on into invoice statement. So I imagine that is just a reference on the invoices to the actual invoice itself, which I would probably recommend turning on. However, I'm not entirely sure on that, so I'd take that with a pinch of salt. And then you have use the actual shipment date when available for invoice to sync to QuickBooks. So that's if you want to align your cost of goods and your invoice date to the same date to make calculating profit a bit easier, and you can do it within the same month, calculate profit margins in the same month, etc. So that can be useful to have that turned on, but it depends on your accounting preferences. Coming into our sync options here, this is probably the main settings you may have to play with. So firstly, here we have auto synchronization, which we usually recommend turning on once you're comfortable with what is syncing across. And this can happen on different bases, such as 2 hours, 4 hours, daily, etc. We usually recommend just having this as frequent as possible because it keeps the 2 platforms as closely connected as possible. There is the ability here to schedule start and end dates, or start times and start dates, and that's useful if you do want the sync to happen at a certain time every day. Here we have the option to consolidate transactions. So if you do ever want, let's say, all of your D2C, all of your retail business to come through as a single invoice just to make reconciling against that invoice a bit easier, you can turn on this consolidate transactions option, and that's going to make that start to happen. It won't happen immediately though, so you will have to enable it below, but we'll get to that in a second. Before you do need to select a generic customer for any journals that are being passed across. They'll need to be aligned to a specific customer. So for that, we can select any customer from the list here. And you may want to set up just a generic default customer for those transactions to go against. Going down into the actual sync types here, so this is a mapping for sales channels where you can choose how you want information to sync. So you can have any kind of sales channel that you're using sync on an individual basis, so you can have each invoice sync individually. A consolidated basis, so all of the invoices sync as a single invoice, or no sync, so you can turn off syncing of invoices for that channel. The same can be done for the cost of goods, so you can sync those individually per sale. You can consolidate your cost of goods to go across overall, and you can turn no sync on. There are some more in-depth analysis that you can do here in terms of which of these are beneficial to you and which wouldn't be, but the main kind of standing points is the individual is going to give you the most traceability of orders, and if anything goes wrong, it's going to be the easiest to find where it came from. Consolidation is going to make your life easier when things are going right, so there's less to reconcile against, there's less to mark as paid for, and there's just less transactions in the system to go through, so that's going to be more beneficial to you if you're not running into lots of errors and you don't need to keep tracing things back. And then no sync, there's rare occasions where you might use this, so let's say you're doing internal sales and you don't want the invoices to sync. Weird example, but you could be doing that. You can turn no sync on for that sales channel there, and that's going to stop that from happening. And then that's it in terms of your the sync methods. And the final option here is the advanced settings, and within here you won't really ever use a lot of this. These are rarely, if ever, used, but a lot of it is just pulling historical data from QBO into Cin7. So you can see a lot of this is just for, like I say, doing that. Honestly, I don't imagine you touching any of this, other than maybe disable or integration or change organization. So using disable integration, you can obviously deactivate QBO's connection on Cin7, and changing organization can allow you to change the QBO account you're mapped to. This might be useful. So find and correct duplicate sale invoice payments in Cin7 Core. I'm not sure how this works, but this might be beneficial if you are experience issues in that. Like I say, a lot of these are very much more niche in terms of the fact they have like one-time uses. But if you do get into any of the troubles where you might need to rely on any of these and you want a bit more information on it, feel free to reach out and we can explain that a bit more in depth in that way. So that's in terms of how the integration works and the setup behind it. So once it's connected and all of that is set up, you then get into the actual syncing aspect, and that's fairly straightforward. So I've got two examples here, and I can show you those now. So if I click the drop down, we can see that we have one quote that's waiting to be synced and one payment/refund that's awaiting to be synced. Typically you would turn quotes off so you wouldn't see that there, and payments and refunds, one of the main uses of the QBO integration is those syncing across and between platforms, and that can happen either way. So if your Shopify orders come into Cin7 Core with a payment against them, that payment can sync up to QBO to be reconciled against. If you have a payment added against a order or an invoice in QBO, that will sync back down into Core. So for any trade orders, you often find it syncing back into Core, and for any D2C orders, you usually do find it syncing up into QBO. So I've got an example of a sale here. It's an advanced sale, but you can just ignore most of the detail. The main takeaway here is that if we go into our invoices and we invoice remaining, or etc., and we save this as a draft, we'll see in our integration sync at the top left here that nothing has changed. So the trigger point for a sales invoice to sync across into QBO is the authorization of the invoice. Once an invoice is authorized, that will then appear in the sync log. I need to refresh my page for that to work, and it will be ready to then sync across into QBO for you. Now, if you have that reoccurring sync turned on, that's then going to be ready and automatically synced at the next interval. The same can be said for purchase orders. So I have a draft purchase invoice here. I'm going to authorize it. Incorrect account has been used. Is that going to work? There we go. So we've synced that now. Once again, we can look at our sync log. So we have one invoice on there currently. Oh, well, it's actually already automatically updated there. So we have two invoices now ready to go across. So it's always at the point of authorizing any invoice in the system where that is then going to sync into QBO. If you have consolidated invoicing turned on, any authorized invoices that appear within a day will be pushed into QBO at the end of the day as one consolidated invoice. So if we now go into here, we can choose to manually sync this and start the sync now. We'll see if we get any errors, and I can walk you through how you might solve or bug or fix those. So we'll just leave this to sync for a second. You can see here it actually doing its thing, so you can see all the different things that are actually syncing between the two platforms as it goes through. This doesn't usually take more than 1 to 2 minutes, or probably even less than that in most cases, and upon doing so you'll be given the following log here. And it's quite handy for finding any issues that may have occurred. So you can see that one invoice has failed to sync, and we can find out why that is if we use the filters on the right. We can filter on our failed and find out why that's failed. So the purchase invoice, the second item, was what failed, and it failed because the payment term used in the purchase order is not mapped to any payment term in QBO. So yeah, that'll be the issue there, is because the payment terms aren't aligned or aren't mapped. So you'll need to undo the purchase order and amend it to a payment term that is in QBO. So there's an example of an error that can come up and how you would actually go about fixing / finding that issue there. Providing we leave this in the failed status, it will try to sync the next time we do use the sync option. If we change it to pending, it will do the same. If we change the skipped, it will stop trying to sync this in the future and will remain as a failed sync forever. So that's it in terms of Cin7. If we now go back into QBO here, we can find our invoice that has successfully come across, aka our sales invoice. So we can do that by going into our invoices here. We've got 3 that have come across. We've got 1 that has been paid for here and 2 that have not. We can go into this one that is due in today for our coffee company here, and we can receive payment. Now, how you actually go about receiving payment from QBO is entirely up to you. This can vary company to company in how you actually go about chasing, reconciling, etc. But once the payment has gone against the invoice, no matter how that's happened in Cin7, or in QBO, sorry, that will then push back down into Cin7, which we can see here. So if I just receive payment, and I then choose to save here, it's wanting me to send an email, which I'm not a fan of, so bear with me. Or just do save and close instead. There we go, so that £6 payment is now saved. If we now refresh, we should see that we have 2 payments to sync here, I believe. Okay, it may not show payments that are waiting to come back down from QBO into Cin7, but we can sync this now. Then once this is complete, we can go back into our sale, and we should then see that that sale has been paid for, which ends the loop of how these syncs kind of work in general. Now this can vary based on the workflow, but this is just the general idea of how it works. So you can see there, paid £6, the payment has gone against the invoice, and if we scroll down here, we can see that payment that has come across from QBO. Now, once again, how you actually put that payment against the invoice in QBO is entirely up to you. So that can be via a reconciliation method, that can be from some sort of add-on or plugin, or it can be just marking it as paid like I did. But that will then finalize your actual process within Cin7. If you have any questions, please let us know. But that will be all from me for now. And I look forward to making more videos in the future. Bye.